Welcome to Rev MD, a podcast created for healthcare professionals by healthcare professionals. We will share tips on medical billing and coding, as well as workflow optimization to help practices succeed, thrive, and grow revenue.
I am so excited to have you here and be on our podcast this week. So talk to me a little bit about, your start in medicine and, introduce yourself to the listeners.
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me here. This is so much fun for me. So I really appreciate the opportunity. My name is Devin Gimbel, and I am a double board certified physician. So I'm board certified in anatomic pathology and dermatopathology, and had a really traditional sort of entryway into medicine. I think I'm one of those people where becoming a doctor was the only thing I ever really wanted to do as a kid. I loved science. I loved the idea of really applying, what we could learn in science truly to just helping people, and I don't think I could see any other kind of tangible way to help people as much as you can with medicine. And so I think I was always just drawn to that, the entire time that I was growing up. And so, like I said, I had a very traditional path. I went to undergrad. I knew I wanted to go to medical school from there. Took a little bit of time off in between, which kind of factors into my story and what I love doing now with my time. But, otherwise was very traditional, went to medical school, followed that up directly with residency and fellowship. And then after fellowship, I joined a physician-owned private practice, practicing, my specific subspecialty, which is dermatopathology.
Well, I have to say, this is my first time getting to interview a fellow pathologist, and that makes me so happy. For our listeners, just to remind you guys, I am also a pathologist. And so to have another pathologist on is exciting. Now, what I am most interested in, though, is, of course, you've had a wonderful career. That's been great. Really talk to me a little bit about your passion, which has now really grown into not only a side hustle, but this growing business and community. So talk to me a little bit about Points to First Class.
Yes. So I run a female physician only Facebook group called Point Me to First Class. And like I said, this kind of dovetails with my other major passion that I've had since I was a child, which is traveling, and not just kind of your regular once every couple of years of travel, but I truly love exploring the world. I'd mentioned that I took a little bit of time off in between undergraduate and medical school, and I actually spent about 2 years wandering around the world and doing various different community health and research projects. And really living in other areas has been a long time passion of mine. And as many people who are in medicine can probably relate to, we don't tend to have the most flexible schedules. Most of us are not having months on end to go wander around the world, when we're in training or even post training. And so, for a long time, especially during training in the first couple of years when I was out of training and really working, very, very diligently in my practice, travel was basically the thing that I would daydream about. And sort of what happened for me is that when I was, first out of training, I think I found myself in that interesting position where the first time really in my life, I actually had a little bit of disposable income. I'd never really been in that position before. So even though I had a lot of student loans, and other kind of financial obligations, I was also finally in a position where I had a little bit of financial resources as well. And so I was really starting to learn a lot about personal finance and, how to set myself up for financial security over the long run. And one of the rabbit holes that I'd kind of gone down to on the internet was really starting to learn about credit cards and what is kind of termed travel hacking, on the internet. But I think it's so much more than that. And it's specifically, how do you use credit cards to earn airline miles or credit card points that you can then use specifically for really luxurious travel experiences that otherwise might cost thousands or tens of thousands of dollars, which, despite my absolute love of travel, I've never really had like $17,000 lying around for a single flight, to take somewhere. And so, I kind of went, like I said, down this, Google rabbit hole where I was starting to learn that, it's actually possible to use credit cards for the things that you're already spending money on anyway, to earn thousands or hundreds of thousands of credit card points and actually turn that into tangible travel experiences. So for me, it was, wow, I really get to indulge in this absolute passion of mine, which is traveling. I can travel in a way that I've never had access to before, like business class flights or really nice, hotels or resorts. And I don't actually have to pay tens of thousands of dollars to do it. And so I first learned how to do this just out of personal interest. And then in the last couple of years, I've really started sharing my love of doing this with other people. Because for a long time, I thought I'm the only person crazy enough to try to figure this out. And then I started having conversation with friends and with colleagues who, lo and behold, also loved to travel and also wanted to learn how to travel, without actually that out of pocket, expense of doing it. And now it's turned into this, multiple thousands people strong community, which is just basically the most fun thing ever to talk about with people on the internet.
I absolutely love this story. I mean, and it's watching this also grow over time, because I think I've been in your group since very early on, and just watching the number of people and the advice, and then the wins you see from trips, being able to, folks saying, hey, I figured this out, or I was able to do this. And so to actually see, these physicians who are able to kind of sort that out has been really cool to see. So for our listeners, they're, private practice docs, and healthcare providers. And so talk to me a little bit about, if you were to give them kind of one tip in their business, how they can use kind of some of the tips you have for growing, their own kind of point system and using those for vacation. Talk to me a little bit about, something you'd give it as advice for them.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll just take one step back real quick and say, I think when I really realized how much potential there was in terms of the ability to earn pretty easily a significant amount of points, which then translates into a really high value, cash value in terms of, flights or hotels, was actually when my husband opened up his own private practice. So I mentioned that I had joined a practice and I was always employed when I was practicing medicine. But about 2 or 3 years after I started, my kind of grown up attending job, my husband, who's a psychiatrist, was going out on his own and was opening up his own practice. And when he was doing that, it became really clear to me, because we funded essentially his opening of his practice, from our own personal savings. So we didn't get a business loan, or any kind of sort of outside funding. And I mean, the nice thing about a psychiatry practice is the overhead is exponentially lower than I think it is for, most other types of fields where, if you're a dermatologist or an anesthesiologist or a pediatrician, your overhead, your expenses are going to be much higher than an outpatient psychiatry office. But even in setting up my husband's practice with the expenses that required, I realized really quickly, wait a minute, if we are going to be spending thousands or tens of thousands of dollars on a monthly basis, to get this practice up and running, I want to actually be leveraging that amount of money that we're spending. And I think what people don't realize when they think about finances is that you either have revenue, like money coming in, or you have expenses, right? Like money going out. And it's one or the other. And we try to maximize revenue, we try to minimize expenses. But when you actually can understand that expenses themselves, whether they're your personal expenses or the expenses required to run your business, even when you get those as low as possible, you still have them, right? And those expenses are actually assets. What I mean by that is that when you can use something like a credit card that's going to earn you even cash back, but especially if you can use a credit card that's going to earn you points, then the higher your expenses are, the more points you can earn from them. And those points have actual value. And so my number one advice for people is actually, before you even get into any granular details about, do I want a credit card that earns points or which credit card is the best one, is to really just take a minute and think to yourself, wow, how much money am I spending on my personal expenses on like an annual basis to run my life and run my family? And especially, for those of you who have your own practices, how much does your practice really rely on in terms of expenses on a monthly or annual basis, in order to run? And for a lot of us, that's tens, hundreds of thousands of dollars, maybe even more. And to be able to step back and say, wait a minute, if those hundreds of thousands of dollars in expenses could actually be getting me something other than just the supplies I'm buying or the services that I'm paying for, would I actually want to take advantage of that or not? And I think the number one thing that I see so often with practice owners and with high income professionals is that they don't even know that this possibility exists, that you can turn your expenses into actual currency in the form of credit card points.
Well, and I think for our own self and our own business, being able to try and monopolize that where we can has been very helpful. And just, learning through your Facebook group has been really helpful for us as well. And so, I guess, where can people come and find you and learn more from you? I think you have some classes and programs as well as the group. So for somebody who's really eager to say, gosh, I don't have time, just like myself, I don't have time to figure out what card is best and where I can go and how to organize myself. That seems overwhelming to me. So how can people find you?
Yeah, that's a great question. And that totally makes sense to me. I fully acknowledge and recognize that I'm probably the very far end of the spectrum in terms of, wanting to go and dig up all this information and put it together. Like you mentioned, we're both pathologists. And to me, this is a really fun puzzle to solve is, how can I really maximize the amount of points that I earn and how I can use them? And I fully acknowledge not everybody's going to reach the same level of obsession that I do around this, but that doesn't mean that people don't want to get started, right? And they just want a little bit of an easier path to do that. And there's a couple of different ways that people can do that, and they can find me if they want to. So I mentioned before that the biggest Facebook group that I run is called Point Me to First Class, and that's specifically for female physicians, so MDs and DOs. And this is where you don't have to be a practice owner or a business owner, just a female physician learning how to do this. And so that's a free Facebook group that anyone who's a female physician is welcome to join. I also have another Facebook group. It's also called Point Me to First Class, but it's for business owners and entrepreneurs and professionals. And so if you're male identifying, or, especially if you're a practice owner, that is the perfect group to be in, because we really, in there, focus specifically on how do you leverage your business expenses, to earn a lot of credit card points. What are the credit cards that make the most sense for a medical practice owner, versus a real estate investor versus, other types of business owners. And so those are both free resources where if you want to come in and even just lurk and learn from others, those are both great places to do that. But for people who really are intrigued by this idea and want to learn how to do this for themselves, for their own families, or with their own, medical practices, but just want some of that hand-holding where they don't have to figure it out all on their own, but they've got kind of a proven roadmap to success, and they just want to be able to follow that with some help. I'm going to be releasing later on this year a course that's completely online, so people can sign up for it and move through it at their own pace, but it really breaks down of all the key components about this hobby so that you don't have to spend a lot of time piecing it together for yourself. Because I know physicians, we're a little busy. We're not exactly the people who have, 100 hours a week where we want to spend, reading stuff online, even if it is something that's really interesting to us. And so I've really tried to distill down everything that I've learned and that's worked for me over the last 8 years to teach, other physicians how to do this exact same thing. And so that course is called Points Made Easy, and it's going to be open for enrollment a little bit later this year. And so anyone who's interested in hearing more about that, they can just go to my website, which is pointmetofirstclass.com, and I'll have all the information about the course, what you can learn in it, and if you want to sign up for it, how you're able to do it there.
That's great. And we'll have all of your contact information in the show notes so folks can go there. And I will say, our whole premise around this podcast is RevMD. So it's all about revenue for healthcare practices. And so this is just one more unique way that practices, whether that's on the business side or on your personal side, can really kind of monopolize on expenses that, like you said, we have to have anyway. And so there's not a better way to kind of be able to use those expenses for good. So one last question. So tell me one favorite deal you personally have seen, or one of your group members has seen that was kind of the most exciting deal you've seen.
Okay, so I'll tell you my personal favorite one that I have done, and then I'll tell you my personal favorite one that was reported in the group that I have never taken advantage of, and I am just oozing with very healthy jealousy about, because I think it actually is going to be an amazing trip for them. So my favorite redemption ever is actually a flight that I recently took this past summer. So I live in the Chicago area, and I flew business class on Qatar Q Suite, which is generally regarded as one of just the best business class products in the world. And I flew from Chicago to Johannesburg on Qatar business class, which was an absolutely phenomenal experience. And one of the things I loved about that so much was that it was an absolute steal. So it was only 75,000 points, which I know a lot of your listeners may have no kind of anchor for what that means, if it's a little or a lot. So you can just kind of trust me when I tell you that it's an absolute steal. It's like half the time I can't fly my mom from Boise to Chicago for 75,000 points when she comes to visit us. And so, being able to fly again, that long a distance, almost 24 hours in one of the best, business class products in the world, which would otherwise cost, $7,000, $8,000, $9,000 out of pocket. And I think I paid, about $60 in taxes for that ticket. So, it was just such an incredible experience in so many different levels. But my favorite redemption that someone in the group has reported is there was recently this really great deal that I could not take advantage of, but someone did, which was to fly business class on Fiji Airlines from the West Coast to Fiji. And again, that was for just an incredibly low amount of points on, a really, really long international flight in an amazing, airline in business class. And so I think one of the things that is just so much fun for me is that, like I said, I kind of enjoyed this hobby for myself and my family for a number of years, which was wonderful, but being able to share it with other people and to now have a Facebook community where I can teach other people how to do this. And I'm seeing people, I'm seeing moms take their daughters on surprise trips to Paris. I'm seeing people fly their parents, home from India for visits, every year in first class. I think that to me is so gratifying to be able to see other people really learn how to do this hobby in a way that they get to do amazing things in their lives. And I think that is just the most fun aspect of this for me.
Oh, I love those stories. I love hearing warm, happy, kind of travel moments that people can have. So again, for our listeners, you guys can go to her Facebook groups at Point Me to First Class or to her website at pointmetofirstclass.com. And I'll have all of those links in the show notes. And so I am just so excited we were able to talk today and really get to learn about all of the amazing deals you've been able to help others be able to secure for their families. And it just makes the time off we get so much more worthwhile.
Thanks again for joining another week of the Rev MD podcast. If you have a topic or question that you need answered, please shoot us an email at info@nationalrevenueconsulting.com, and we're happy to create an episode out of it. As always, if you could please go to the Apple Podcast and rate and give us a review, we would really appreciate it. Thanks again, and we'll talk to you next week.